We're going to take a peek back into my 2026 ranking list as I have 5 more movies that I want to add to it today. This is the list that we established last time in our 2026 so far video. Only adjustments I would make is that Supergirl has definitely soured with me over time. I think I was giving that movie just too much benefit of the doubt because I have a connection to that story, that screenplay, but honestly, I think that should actually make me even harder on the story and all of its shortcomings. So that one I'm definitely going to put in poorly constructed. So I'm bopping that one down to a 4 out of 10. And the only other thing here is I do feel that The Death of Robin Hood should probably be under a Toy Story 5 in my ranking here. So those are the only changes that I'm making so far, and yeah, we're going to start hopping into these 5 films over here. Let's start with The Invite. This movie was directed by Olivia Wilde, and it was released on July 10th, 2026, with a runtime of 107 minutes. The budget was $12 million, and the box office sits at $33.6 million. The Metacritic sits at a mighty 82. I actually didn't have time to catch this one in the theater, so I paid for a ticket online at my local Cinemark, and then allegedly I found other means to watch it from home. The plot description reads, Joe and Angela's marriage is on thin ice. When they invite their enigmatic upstairs neighbors for a dinner party, the night spirals into unexpected places. I haven't been a huge fan of either of Olivia Wilde's previous films. Booksmart was fine, but just not really my speed, and then I was excited to see Don't Worry Darling because I really like some of those surrealist films coming after Get Out, but that turned out to be a disaster. It was ridden with behind-the-scenes marital and relationship problems, the underlining story of what that movie really was, because it's just all more interesting what the film itself was. Harry Styles was cast in the movie, and I guess Olivia Wilde was cheating on her husband with Styles, on the set of the movie during production. It was just a disaster, and so was the movie, to be honest. It kind of reflected that tension behind the scenes. After that PR nightmare, it's only fitting to see her return with a far more focused and small-scale film, but one that directly hinges on that underpinning tension found on the set of Don't Worry Darling. The Invite is Wilde's post-divorce processing movie. It's a chaotic dark comedy about the failing relationship of two, played by Wilde herself and Seth Rogen. The Invite is unabashedly a relationship spiraling out of control thanks to this one moment type of movie, in a way that makes the conflict feel pretty obvious. I guess you could call it a bottle movie, which I do enjoy those normally, but in my opinion, this just fits too cleanly into a genre in that way. It's kind of like watching an action movie, and the action is only happening because it feels like it has to for what is promised to you, more than naturally escalating the story up to that inevitable outcome. I definitely like something like Force Majeure better because of how it organically sprouts the conflict out of engaging circumstances, and then it has a lot more to offer on top of that. It's kind of hard to explain that. It feels like a contemporary 60s studio movie that way, where you know exactly what you're signing up for, which, to be fair to the movie, is a premise that they mostly deliver on. Maybe a more pointed way of talking about this movie is that it feels like a normie version of a bottle comedy movie about a polygamist relationship. The movie never even commits to showing the concept play out or exploring it from any authentic point of view, rather using that simple concept as a way to approach a very basic emotional catharsis Wilde must be looking for through making this movie. It certainly could have been a more biting movie. The characters, once introduced, fit pretty cleanly into their character types and never evolve much. The concept is never explored too deeply or, like I said, from a specifically authentic point of view, and the ending offers this emotional conclusion that just didn't mean much to me by the end of the day. If you're looking for a contemporary film with similar themes that's a lot more thorny and substantive, maybe look towards something like Pillion. The standout in this movie is really Wilde's direction and the enjoyable cast. The blocking is fun, utilizing mirrors and doorways effectively, all captured within this one apartment. The direction and editing together is crisp, energetic, and tight. It relies a lot on snappy editing rather than long takes or anything highly coordinated, like you find in a movie such as The Humans, but it still worked and effectively created some motivated shots that paid off later in the film. It honestly feels like this level of direction would have been better suited to a film with more to offer, in my opinion. There's one scene where Wilde asks Edward Norton's character for help with a decision. It's cross-cutting between two conversations, clearly implying that she is asking how to know if she should divorce her husband, reinforced by the fact that the other timeline they're cutting to was just talking about how Penelope Cruz's character divorced her previous husband after meeting Edward Edward Norton. I like how it turns out that they're just talking about a paint color on the walls, but this is an example of some dualism and nuance that I often didn't find in the script of the movie, even if it was enjoyable moment to moment regardless. There's nothing all too challenging or surprising about the movie. As my day job, I'm a high-level director at a local Chick-fil-A, and of all the movies that I begged my employees to go watch over the years, this is one that strangely grabbed a lot of their attention. Justification to my feeling that this movie appeals more to younger audiences wanting to see something a little bit edgy, more than adults looking for something genuinely thought-provoking or challenging. Still, I guess I have to say that this is my favorite of Wilde's work so far, and I do hope that she keeps leaning in this direction. It's more restrained, mature, and far better crafted than any of her previous work, probably a career-saving rebound after Don't Worry Darling. I do think that the contrast between the quality of her work may have just caught people off guard, subsequently overinflating the critic review scores. I really don't think that this film deserves an 82 on Metacritic, but I do think it's an accurate sign towards some of the filmmaking craft found in the movie. For me, this is a mild 6 out of 10, it could even drop to a 5 if I were to watch it again. An above average flick, but not one that I will rewatch or own. I'm going to put this one right here under I Love Boosters. Funny enough, I do think that Mother Mary has more meaty material to offer you, but I do think the Invite is a much smoother and more professional experience as far as how it's crafted, so these two are pretty close to me. They could be interchangeable, but I'll put the Invite above right now just for the level of craft that it offers. I'm weighting Time and Water earlier into this video because I like using the platform of really big hitters like the Odyssey and Spider-Man Brand New Day, even the Invite, as an excuse to tuck in something a little bit lesser known and something I might want more people to check out. That is Time and Water, because I really liked this movie, as you'll come to see. So Time and Water, directed by Sarah Dosa, was released on January 27th, 2026, with a runtime of 93 minutes. The budget is not disclosed as of now, and the box office only sits at about $111,000. Metacritic sits at a strong 76, and I watched it on Disney+. It just premiered there and on Hulu pretty recently under their National Geographic offerings. The plot description reads, facing the death of his country's glaciers and the loss of his beloved parents, Icelandic writer turns his archives into a time capsule to hold what is slipping away: family, memory, time, and water. Sarah Dosa's previous documentary, Fire of Love, absolutely crushed me and climbed its way to my fourth favorite film of 2022 for its breathtaking stylistic sensibilities mixed with a very tender and poetic form of storytelling. Between just these two, I find her documentaries to be lighter on science and hard fact, but far more intimate and emotionally captivating to me. That may be a turnoff for some, because I see a lot of reception around Time and Water being critical of the film for not leaning far enough into the exploration of climate change and global warming as a concept, given that it's about the melting of glaciers. But I do think that what she offers in return as a filmmaker is just as valuable and, for me, far more impactful. This film is an exploration of family. Its perspective is from a middle-aged man reflecting on the lives of his grandparents, parents, and his own children. It's an examination of 4 generations of an Icelandic family's history and how their story is mirrored by the geography that they love. He's learning to reconcile with the passing of his grandparents just as the icebergs melt away before his eyes. It's an intergenerational love letter to the nature and memory of Iceland and the souls who grew up there. It's a sorrowful meditation on how to deal with change, and on top of that, it serves as a political eulogy for the icebergs and the mountains once known in Iceland, as well as how to go forward from here in order to save their home. I found the film touching as a portrait of how to pass down tradition and how to process world events through the myths in your local regions, countries, and religions. This documentary is both a breathing call to action and a time capsule meant to capture the 200-year span that this man is capable of understanding through the lives of all of his relatives still living or just passing on. And he hopes that this film, in essence, will help set up those who carry on the upcoming 200 years of his family after him. Man, this movie really made me tear up. I thought it was beautiful and thought-provoking. I love how these characters' lives are told visually through real-world footage of their geography transforming and deteriorating before them. Just like Fire of Love, this film is a treat to the senses, as stunning visuals that seem plucked out of time. Much of it actually is, since a lot of this is early 2000s home video footage edited together to portray the history of this family. The sound design and music work is excellent also, bringing to life the glaciers as we peer into the depths of their deep ice. I watched The Devil Wears Prada 2 right after this film, and let me tell you, this movie was a vastly superior meditation on change, and a far, far better film in general. I highly recommend checking this one out. It's a brisk 93-minute documentary filled with rich poetry, beautiful nature, and a touching autobiography portrait, wonderfully textured filmmaking to just cap it all off and bring it all together. I really love everything that Sarah Dosa has done here, and this is one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I'm going to give this one a moderate 8 out of 10. I really loved this movie. Definitely check out her other film, Fire of Love, as well, because I still think that that's my favorite of her movies, but Time and Water is no slouch. I love this movie. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm going to give this one 8 out of 10, like I said, and put it right above The Bone Temple as my second favorite movie of the year so far. Minions and Monsters, directed by Pierre Coffin, released on July 1st, 2026, with a runtime of 90 minutes. The budget was $85 million and it has a box office of $417 million worldwide. The Metacritic sits at a 70, and I watched it in the theater with my wife and siblings. Plot description reads, this rambunctious, ridiculous, and totally true story of how the Minions conquered Hollywood, became movie stars, lost everything, unleashed the monsters onto the world, and then banded together to try and save the planet from mayhem that they had just created. Well, that's a crazy sentence. It really gives you the whole plot too. That's crazy. Alright. This is the second highest rated Illumination movie, second only to the original Despicable Me. Both of these are trouncing all of their other films by a significant margin, and honestly, I think I agree. I'd need to see the original Despicable Me again to have a concrete opinion, but my knee-jerk reaction is that Minions and Monsters may actually be my favorite Illumination so far, which is not something I anticipated at all when sitting down to check it out. I've been a certified Minions hater pretty much since the original came out. The way they always lean into the simplest baby brain designs for maximum commercial opportunity. The terrible needle drops, the lack of satisfying narrative elements like setups and payoffs, or even a cohesive story. Humor that panders to the lowest common denominator. The cheap, keyframey animation, etc. I think I'm particularly harsh towards these movies because I have such a heart for this type of movie. Any of the Wallace and Gromit or Shaun the Sheep Aardman Studios projects, for instance, are often similarly silent or mostly silent films driven by visual storytelling and gags, a strong sense of reincorporation, striking visual direction led by a sharp sense of wit and charm, brought to life in gorgeous, painstakingly handcrafted worlds, and absolutely banging earworm music. So it just stings all the more to me when we have something like this that's so successful here that knocks on that same door but just pales so desperately in comparison. Minions and Monsters, though, is the closest that I felt Illumination has come to capturing that same magic. Set in the universe of old Hollywood magic, this film is effectively a love letter to those times and the filmmaking styles within it. Ultimately, the story is still pretty thin and doesn't offer some heartwarming moral by the end like its peers might, but it's an entertaining ride with a clear sense of progression, and there were a few setups and payoffs that I wasn't really expecting to pay off as effectively as they did. Some of the set pieces were actually fun, especially this particular train sequence where the Minions are using their weight to tilt the train to the left and right sides of the track to avoid pedestrians in a very Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin fashion. In fact, during the sequence, we even see a reference to the famous falling house stunt from Keaton's Steamboat Bill Jr. There are lots of references in this movie as always, but I personally found the reverence for filmmaking here more enjoyable than the normal reference and shenanigans, especially considering they play directly into the story and desires of our main minions. They still are just references, but they're not 100% throwaway. I also appreciated that they didn't censor the crude language used in a Casablanca reenactment. I genuinely laughed at a Citizen Kane gag. I enjoyed some of the character designs. I think that Dort is particularly weak and leans into that oversimplifying that I don't always enjoy, but the studio executive twins are fun, and I liked some of their monsters that they run into. They kind of give SpongeBob energy. Settling into a golden age Hollywood flick, they appropriately used more orchestration for the score in this film, calling back to 40s films in particular. It's honestly much more refreshing than how they usually just randomly shuffle the top trending pop tracks into placeholder moments in their movies. I sound like I'm about to give this movie a 10 out of 10, but I just really wanted to give Illumination their flowers for the things that they finally did right in my eyes. It does feel like a lot more of a creative liberty for Coffin here, as they directed the the original trilogy of Despicable Me films and the first Minions movies. It almost feels like he finally got just one for him, and ironically, it's tracking to be the weakest entry yet at the box office. Movies that I like are allergic to success, I tell you. But I do think that this one is doing fine on their relatively tight budget. I'm not sure how I feel about this film equating an Oscar win to the quality of a movie, because they really push that in the movie. It's a silly concept. Illumination clearly really wants to win Best Animated Feature with this one, which I'm sure they won't, but I gotta say for me that this is unironically superior to Toy Story 5. I don't really mind it too much in this movie, but I do hope that we avoid seeing that begging for recognition in future titles if they put in this much effort. Like, you produced one decent movie, okay? Let's just build up from here and not take that for granted.
Somebody get these beggars out of here!
I don't know, you might all laugh when I finally score this movie, because for all the praise I've been giving it, this is still kind of the bare minimum that I'm looking for out of a movie. Like, this should be the floor that we demand for our family-friendly entertainment. I'm gonna give this one a high of 5 out of 10. I could be persuaded on a good day to give it a generous 6. On our tier list here, I'll tuck this one right under Mother Mary. The Odyssey was directed by Christopher Nolan and released on July 17th, 2026, with a runtime of 173 minutes. The budget was a whopping $250 million, and so far at the box office, it has grossed $1.1 billion, set to sail way past his highest grossing movie yet. The Metacritic sits at a super strong 88, and I watched it 3 times in the theater, twice in normal format and once in 70mm IMAX out of Dallas. I talked extensively about this one in my enormous Nolan retrospective and ranking. To hear more about my philosophical musings on the film, you can check out that video, while in this one, I'll be giving more of a vanilla review about the craft and my personal feelings on it as a whole. While I was a little bit torn about my Nolan rankings at the end of that video, as I had only seen it once so far, this is where I'm at definitively as my 3rd viewing. The Odyssey is a film that I really love, and one that connects with me more on an emotional level than a lot of Nolan's other works. Yet it's also one that might rank in the top 3 jankiest of Nolan's films. I'll get to that in a moment, but I want to focus on the amazing parts of it first. The grandeur, the spectacle, and the pure physicality of this film truly lives up to the promise, and it delivers an experience you have to see on the biggest screen possible. Seeing it in its full 70mm IMAX format is breathtaking and a joy to experience. It does elevate a few of its scenes, like the giants in particular. My favorite part of the film is the personal journey for Odysseus and him reconciling with his guilt over the siege of Troy. The way that Nolan cuts the siege of Troy into all 3 acts is brilliant and amounts into a tremendous 3rd act. I really enjoyed Nolan leaning into horror more than he ever has before here. The Cyclops and Circe scenes were standouts for me. I hope that he finds the angle for a horror movie one day, as he's been musing about it in recent interviews. Performances across the board are really strong in this movie. If you want to hear which of them are my favorite, you can also check out my performances tier list video here, or by finding the link in the description below. For the first time in Nolan's career, I do feel that his commitment to IMAX might have actually been holding him back here, ironically. I do like that this is the first film shot entirely on the full 70mm IMAX format, because as there are no unmotivated shifts between that aspect ratio anymore, as are found in some of his other movies. But I found the pacing of this movie to be hampered by the runtime restrictions, as a 70mm IMAX print can only amount to 3 hours long in total. And while they still undercut that time by 7 minutes, I read about how his editor Jennifer Lame was forced to be aggressive in the cut, mercilessly chopping out anything that wasn't absolutely necessary to the story. For that, I find that some of the scenes lack key pieces of context to hold their significance in the story. The pacing can feel a bit choppy, and a few characters are undercut from their emotional potential. I do think that a quote-unquote director's cut could result in a more even film that smooths out much of the jank, and just makes it a more powerful experience. I wouldn't mind this being even like 4 hours long. I mentioned that the 3rd act is quite strong, and in contrast, I think that the 1st act is one of Nolan's roughest launches, throwing a ton of awkward exposition at us immediately. Nolan is obviously not a stranger to heavy exposition, but even in something like Inception, we find both the audience and a key character being motivated appropriately to learn this information when they do. Where here in the Odyssey, many of the opening moments are the characters having conversations that don't really make sense for them to be having in a logical context. Telemachus and his mother Penelope would have already talked about Odysseus' absence years ago, and other examples are the way they talk about the basic things laid out about Zeus's law in this land, and it's something all of these people would have already known. There's no naive perspective they are teaching. They're just talking to each other in obvious ways that they definitely would not have if you were actually living there. The exposition itself isn't horrible or anything, but it's just not motivated in the right ways to feel organic, and that's a personal pet peeve of mine. It results in a pretty rough start to the film that keeps me borderline cringing until the adventure really begins, where we're cast off with Odysseus. An example of a scene lost without context is the encounter with the giants in the woods. Without the proper story context gleaned by reading the original text, the scene comes off as a filler episode in Odysseus' journey, just another problem they ran into along the way, where it really could have carried much heavier implication about Odysseus' relationship with Poseidon if that key context was positioned correctly. That's an example of story context, while an example of visual context that was lost through the cut is the scene with Circe, where there's really a moment where Odysseus suddenly holds power over Circe in their conversations because he grabs her bird, but that is not really portrayed through the visuals. You have to infer it afterwards, because it just wasn't, there was no shot properly establishing that he had that grip on the bird and thus, power over her in the conversation. It really just feels like a weird shift in the dynamic, and you have to put it together afterwards. A character that I felt was undercut by the runtime was Calypso. She certainly serves her plot purpose in the story, but I feel like filling out the romantic prison angle between her and Odysseus would have lent a lot of strength to his yearning to return home to Penelope, and subsequently the ending that Nolan arrives at for the film. There are also just some janky edits in the film that I feel don't work at all, chief among them being the moment where the boar charges Odysseus while hunting near the beginning of the film. Working off the 70mm IMAX, everything has a very shallow field of view as well, and it's clear that the focus pullers were really struggling at some points in the film. There are entire shots where the focus is missed multiple times, and it's just kept in the movie, which is surprising. Okay, so backing up, reasons such as all of these are why I can't put the Odyssey higher up the chain in my Nolan ranking, but let me be clear that I still think this is a very, very special film, and I think that its pieces of value far outweigh its shortcomings. I again have to pinpoint how much I do like the exploration of Odysseus at the end of the day. I love how Nolan offers up his very altruistic worldview through what he says at the sack of Troy. I talk about details like the plucking of Odysseus' bowstring in my long-form video, and how those things really amount up to truly fleshing out his character. I think that the practical effects are genuinely staggering achievements in this movie. I really like his depiction of the mythological elements. This has to be the best depiction of the sirens I've ever seen, with some inspired presentation choices. I think that Goranson's score is as strong as usual for the film. I would describe this film as one of Nolan's more balanced on a technical level, and while still not perfect, the mixing of the dialogue with the music and sound effects is far clearer and more discernible in this film than some of his others. It offers up the action and the character in better equal than the likes of Tenet. This is a great movie, and I suspect it will be a big awards player at the end of the year, but if Nolan were to win Best Picture only once, I'm certainly glad that it was Oppenheimer he took it for. We'll see how this one does. It's exciting to see this absolutely dominate at the box office. I'm really glad for Nolan, and I'm curious to see where he goes next. I would definitely recommend this film. I'm going to give this one a low 8 out of 10. I don't know, I've seen it 3 times and I still sit at that 8 because I do think that it offers that much value despite the jank. I considered giving it a 7, but I think that an 8 out of 10 is comfortable for me. So this one I'm going to put at the bottom of my 8 out of 10s on my ranking. My 4th favorite film of the year so far. Alright, last one for the day. We come to the second big dog, Spider-Man: A Brand New Day, directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. It was released on July 31st, 2026, with a runtime of 145 minutes. The budget was a really big $225 million, but it is destroying at the box office. At the time of recording, this movie is sitting at $1.7 billion, and it's just trugging along. It's going to easily soar past that $2 billion mark. The Metacritic sits at a mild 66, and I watched it in the theater, plastered to the screen on the front row in 3D. These theaters were just sold out. Alright, we actually did it. We made it to a 4th Spider-Man movie. I think a good starting point for this review would be to establish my relationship with the previous Holland MCU Spider-Man movies. Homecoming was a refreshing restart for the character that brings him back to high school, a return to the struggle between balancing high school and the web slinging. The best parts of this movie are the familial relationships between Peter and his friends, and specifically, some of the turns with Michael Keaton's character, who serves as one of the best villains in the MCU, certainly top 5. Contrasting that is a super weak visual and action direction. There aren't any standout action scenes, the choreography and blocking is very weak, and any of the intimate character scenes are just shot with bland A and B camera setups. It's a harsh contrast when he had stronger action scenes in Civil War than in his own standalone feature. I'd give that one a mild 6 out of 10. Far From Home was a complete miss for me. I didn't think anything interesting happened in the plot for at least an hour, and I was checked out by then. While there were some genuine character moments in Homecoming, I felt like this one mostly just served as future MCU setup. The direction is weak here again, except whenever you enter those fully CGI scenes with Mysterio. It just sucks that there's a clear distinction between what is practical and what is not, and that makes me checked out for the action scenes. Not terrible, but completely bland and forgettable, a low 5 out of 10 for me. And then we have No Way Home, which marks a significant step up from John Watts as a director. There's a clear progression in presenting coordinated oneers and complicated blocking, even in the dialogue scenes. The action relies on a good blend of practical and CGI, finally allowing the strong Spidey suit design to feel authentic within the world. I say all of that, but then I look at the movie and it also just feels like AI slop at this point. I just don't really love the visual look in general, and that's matched with just multiverse nonsense. The shots are much wider, more confident, and creative. Now, the story, on the other hand, literally makes no sense. The whole movie relies on the premise of fan fiction, bringing together characters we loved from past movies into this one. Thankfully, the inclusions of these characters gave them genuinely new scenarios to live out, not only relying on nostalgia bait references. To look at it on any objective merit in that regard will make the movie completely fall apart, but without question, this is the most entertaining and most professionally crafted Spidey film in the MCU thus far. So in those regards, your mileage will vary to crazy degrees. I could see someone giving this one a 3 or a 4 out of 10, and I wouldn't blame them at all, but it happened to be a nostalgic soft spot for me, and I was able to just be swept up in the fun of it all. So for pretty much the exact opposite reasons as Homecoming, I would also give this one a low 6 out of 10. On any given day, I could change my mind about whether I prefer Homecoming or No Way Home. That leads us directly to Brand New Day. Leading up to this film, we've been promised a more grounded return for the Spider. We're back in the streets with lower and more personal stakes, and I've seen a lot of buzz about the practical stunts and filmmaking. This comes off the heels of Cretton's last MCU offering, Shang-Chi, which was completely decimated by a terrible script and some poor decisions, but it was always underlined by the best action directing the MCU has seen maybe ever, especially in that first half of the movie. The action was genuinely memorable and impressively choreographed, presenting sequences so strong that it justified the whole making of video series on YouTube, breaking down how they pulled off some of the action. It was clear that Cretton's passion was in the action, and when we cut to the other scenes, they just looked like actual commercials, and there even was a car commercial in that movie, which was crazy. Overexposed, disgustingly framed, poor music choices, cringe-inducing performances, and a terrible script, etc. It was just a wholly bipolar film that did not result in something greater than the sum of its parts for me, but I've been sitting here willing to give Cretton another shot, wanting to see more of that action spectacle, hopefully paired with some better material. So, all of the pieces seem to be in the right places from what they're saying. On top of that, it looks like this is the highest rated movie in the entire MCU so far from audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. So how did we actually do? I actually liked this one a lot. Similarly to the Thunderbolts, I was shocked by the thematic depth found in this movie, effectively talking about the, male loneliness epidemic of sorts through Spider-Man's journey after the mind wipe that happened at the end of No Way Home. This is by far the best written of Tom Holland's projects, intentionally positioning the story with characters that can each feed into the central themes. I won't talk about it too much, but clearly each of these characters have alter egos of sorts, a dangerous side to them that they try to keep pent up. The script genuinely meant something to me, which was awesome to see and not something that I expected walking into the movie. In that same way, I was shocked to find this movie actually looking like a real movie. The cinematography is pretty nice and very practical. It actually casts shadows and it has motivated lighting choices. There were a few standout scenes for me that will stick in my head as some of the best visuals in live-action Spider-Man projects. The direction and the action is also a lot more energetic and expressive than the average Watts picture. Maybe on a similar level to No Way Home, but I think I still prefer this one, and especially when paired with the strikingly better cinematography, this is just a much cleaner and more refreshing project than any of those original three. I recommend seeing this movie in 3D as well while it's still in the theaters, because I really liked how that presented some of the web slinging and everything. It really captured the momentum well, and I enjoyed that experience a lot. The weakest part of this movie was the music for me. It just pales in comparison to both the Raimi and Spider-Verse series, and I mean even the Andrew Garfield stuff from Hans Zimmer. It doesn't offer a single memorable composition in the entire movie, instead just relying on a few needle drops at pivotal moments. They weren't bad needle drops, but I just wish that this had more of an identity in the music. I'm not gonna spoil the identity of the villain in the movie, but I really enjoyed the simple physicality to the body jumping that takes place here with her powers. It was effectively presented and fun. Overall, I just really enjoyed this movie. There are some pretty great scenes with Tom and Zendaya together, especially one outside of a neon sign where some pretty dark things happen, unironically affecting work to me. This is what a superhero movie should strive to be. I think this is kind of the goalpost. It's fun. It offers something thematically through the journey of a hero. It has well-directed action, an interesting villain to complement that hero's journey, etc. I think that if this movie wanted to be equal with the original Raimi movie for me, it would just need to be a little bit tighter and have better music. The runtime itself wasn't a huge deterrent, but I think that if I were to rewatch it all of the time, I would have liked it to at least fit in within that 2-hour mark. Few too many product placements for me. Like, I really wish there was just not Star Wars and Lego stuff in this movie. But I was really impressed with this one. I would give this one a very solid 7 out of 10. This is definitely my third favorite live-action Spider-Man movie under the first two Raimis, or probably my fifth overall favorite Spider-Man movie to date. High up in my MCU rankings, this is probably in my top 5 MCUs of all time. This one, I'm actually going to put at the top of my 7 out of 10s. I think I just connected with the themes in the story more than whatever Project Hail Mary had going on, and thankfully it had a lot of practical filmmaking chops to kind of equal some of what was going on there. I think the story's stronger here, some of the filmmaking is stronger here, but I think this nets out for me a little bit above. So yeah, here's my ranking so far. I'll have another one of these coming out soon because I'm going to see the end of Oak Street soon and some stuff like that. I'll have a few more to catch up on as well. But yeah, this is my ranking for 2026 so far as we trug along through the year. Yeah, this set right here is really great. Please check out Time and Water if you'll have time. That one is phenomenal. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.